Welcome back. All right, so yesterday I talked about the San Jose Sharks and their rebuild and what they've done this summer to show that maybe the worst is over. Now I'm going to talk about Chicago today because it's a similar feeling. I do think Chicago's a little bit further along in their rebuild than San Jose, but they've really done their best to boost their lineup for this coming season. So this is a team that's missed the playoffs 6 of the last 7 years. 2018, 2019, and then 2021 through 2024, keeping in mind there's an asterisk next to that 2020 playoff appearance in that they scored an upset in the qualifying round. Otherwise, if it was traditional playoffs in 2020, they wouldn't have made it then either. So it's been a while, and it may not feel like it's been a while, but it's been almost a decade since we saw Chicago in a playoff position once the playoffs get rolling, and they got swept in 2017 by the Nashville Predators. What's interesting is that sweep was seen as a huge surprise at the time, but it was foretelling that the team's good fortunes were about to come to an end. So for Chicago right now, they have some cap space, $4,765,000, but not as much cap space as one might think of a Chicago team that I don't think anybody's going to be picking to make the playoffs, but they should get better. They do have Toronto's first round draft pick next year. That's top 10 protected, though. So if Toronto has a terrible season, that switches over to 2026, but then it's not protected in 2026. They have extra second round picks in 2025, 2026, and 2027. So they're thinking ahead. And so the rebuild is not done by any stretch, not pretending that it is. But this is a team that wants to get better. And when you look at the players that they've added and the stats they put up, this is a team that should get better. So I'll skip to this part here. They were 32nd in goals scored this past season with 179. In goals against, they were 29th with 290. So everything needed to get better. Adding Bertuzzi will help with the offense. He's 29 years of age, signs a contract with a $5.5 million cap hit that goes till 2028. 80 games, 21 goals, 22 assists, 43 points last season with Toronto. Teuvo Teravainen returns at age 29, $5.4 million cap hit till 2027. In 76 games with Carolina last season, 25 goals, 28 assists, 53 points. So right there, you've added 46 goals to your roster. Should absolutely help get you at least above the 200 goal mark for next season. Because you have to keep in mind they may not score at that same rate in Chicago as they did in their former location, but they should be pretty good. Ilya Mikheyev, who really needed this move, he's also 29 years of age. $4.037 million cap hit with Chicago as Vancouver retained 15%. That contract goes till 2026. In 78 games in Vancouver, he had 11 goals, 20 assists, 31 points. The speed is there, the talent's there. He just has to find a way to bury the puck. Pat Maroon comes over at 36 years of age, just on a one-year contract for $1.3 million in 51 games this past season, 4 goals, 12 assists, 16 points. I'm mildly surprised he didn't retire in the offseason, but if he feels like he has more to give, teams will hire him. Pat Maroon, physical, good bottom six forward, teams are going to want him. Craig Smith signs a one-year deal. He's 34 years of age. 75 games played this past season with Dallas. 11 goals, 9 assists, 20 points. He was useful for Dallas as a depth player. And Chicago definitely has some depth this coming season. We will look at that. Alec Martinez on the blue line. He's 36 years of age. It's a $4 million cap hit for the one season. He's being seen as a defenseman that can help teach some of the good, big, young players on that Chicago blue line. He only played 55 games because of the game that he plays. A lot of shot blocking, and it wears you down over time. 4 goals, 13 assists, 17 points. Martinez taking this mentor role, to me, feels very similar to when Nick Foligno goes here last summer. And Chicago's done a good job of getting veterans to come in and agree to do that mentoring, and that's really important. It includes TJ Brody in my eyes. He's 34 years of age, $3.75 million cap hit till 2026. 78 games played with the Leafs last year, a goal, 25 assists, 26 points. Now, if you watch Chicago play, you know that Mrazek was fantastic for the most part. Soderblom was good at points, not as good as Mrazek, so they sign Brossoit. Brossoit comes in at 31 years of age. It's a $3.3 million cap hit till 2026. He had a .927 save percentage and a 2.00 goals against average. Very good win-loss record in Winnipeg. He's not going to put up those numbers in Chicago, but he should help to solidify their goaltending. So they definitely did a good job on the blue line, adding Martinez and Brody. They added a little bit of punch to their offense with Bertuzzi and Teravainen coming in. And so with the goaltending addition of Brossoit, all around, Chicago should be a better team. Because last season's 317 points percentage, that's the worst Chicago has put up since they had a 307 points percentage back in 1954-55. I have not got there yet in my videos looking at the history of the NHL, but I'll get there soon enough. Now, when we look at their top prospects, and I wanted to highlight their top 2 draft picks in each of the last 3 drafts, Kevin Korchinski was drafted 7th in 2022. They draft Frank Nazar at 13th. And both of those players should be playing a relatively prominent role on the roster soon enough. Korchinski should be in the top 4 this year. I don't see any reason why, even with the additions on the blue line, he wouldn't be. And Nazar, I think, has a chance to stick on that third line. I was looking at some depth charts that were trying to predict this season's lines, and I actually went in and messed around with them and came up with my own idea of where the lines may end up. We shall see. It's one thing with adding so many players. We have no idea who's going to play on what line. We know who might, but we don't know who will. 2023, of course, they drafted Bedard first overall, and they got Oliver Moore at 19th. I still think Oliver Moore is going to be a steal at 19th. This year, they draft Lev Shanov at number 2, and then they draft Sasha Boisvert at 18. Now, when Lev Shanov's drafted at 2nd, it's a bit of a surprise it's not Demidov. Though, when you look at their top prospects, you look at the guys they've been drafting early, it does make some sense. You go with the defensemen since you believe Nazar, Bedard, Moore. These guys are going to be top forwards, and so having Korchinski is one thing, but having Lev Shanov is another. And so they're building a really good, strong young defense that we'll talk about when we get over here. So they had 8 of the first 100 picks in 2022 and 2023. They had 6 of the top 100 picks this year. They're doing what teams that are in a full rebuild should do. Acquire as many draft picks as possible. Not all of them are going to pan out. You're going to have players that bust. But that's okay, because if you have a lot of draft picks, odds are some of those are going to turn out. It's like the lottery, as I've said before. So now we'll come over to their depth chart, and I'll highlight the unsigned ones right now. Boisvert, Moore, Van Acker are 3 forwards that are as yet unsigned by Chicago. On the blue line, Lev Shanov, Rinzel. These are all first-round draft picks. And then in net, Gahan, who was not quite a first-round draft pick, was close, but Gahan's seen as being a really good, solid prospect in net. And so, yeah, there's still 6 prospects here. They haven't signed to contracts yet that they're expected to in the coming years, and is going to make their depth even better. Now, we look up front, and again, it is hard to predict who's going to be on what lines, but Bertuzzi kind of has to play with Bedard, doesn't he? Which should bode well for Bertuzzi's goals going up, because Bedard likes to pass the puck. And then I think Teravainen will probably be on his other wing. And Bedard should be quite happy having wingers that are very talented. Now, Kurashev on his wing last year, I think that's part of the reason he was a minus 44, because everybody highlights the minus 44. Kurashev was a minus 44 too, and what's interesting to me is, before the season started, there were a lot of Hawks fans that were not big fans of Kurashev. Now, Kurashev's totals were pretty good because he played with Bedard. We'll see if that happens this season as well. Taylor Hall should be back and be on that second line. Dickinson is the second line centers where, I don't know, I guess you start with Dickinson down the middle in this at number 2. Kurashev on the right side probably. But Nazar and then Reichel, I think you want to give them the opportunity. Now, Lucas Reichel did not take that next step this past season. He really hasn't had a great time of it at the National Hockey League level yet, but he's still very young. Athanasiou and Mikheyev on that third line with Nazar, I think that can work. And then you'd have Foligno and Maroon on the fourth line with Reichel. I don't think Foligno ends up on the fourth line. I think he somehow ends up probably on the third line. But there's good depth here, and that's something Chicago just didn't have this past season. So you have Sanford, Donato, Craig Smith, Landon Slaggert. Slaggert should be on this roster, I think. Although maybe they give him a year at Rockford and give him a chance to really get his game to that next level before bringing him up for the 2025-2026 season. Gutman. I like Gutman's game. I think he's a good, hardworking player. And Joey Anderson re-signs with the team after he went to market. So there's good depth in this forward group. It should definitely score a lot more than that 179 goals. I still don't think Chicago is going to be a playoff team, but they should be at least 417 this year in points percentage rather than 317, and probably a little bit higher than that. On the blue line, you've got Korchinski, you've got Seth Jones. The Seth Jones contract, part of the reason that they have less than $5 million in cap space, but it's not actively really hurting them at this point in time. Vlasic and Brody, I think, will end up being that second pairing, and I say I think because Martinez and Murphy, you got Phillips, and then you got Crevier. Crevier looked pretty good in his call-up as well. You got Kaiser, you got Del Mastro. There's some good depth on this blue line, definitely some kids on the blue line. Korchinski may end up in that top pairing. Vlasic may end up in that top pairing. And, Martinez to start the season maybe is on that top pairing. And again, it'll be interesting to see whether or not Martinez can stay healthy for a full season and really help to shepherd these defensemen along in Chicago. In net, as previously mentioned, you got Mrazek, you got Brossoit. I think it'll be a 1A, 1B situation. Soderblom and Comesso likely to split time in Rockford. So it'll be very interesting to see with the Chicago Blackhawks this year just how well this lineup gels, because you've got so many new players. They're not all going to know each other. Even goaltenders. Sometimes it's taken for granted. Like, goaltender changing teams. What difference does that make? Some goalies come out and play the puck. Some goalies come out and they communicate a lot with their defense. Some don't. And so this is the kind of stuff you want to learn during training camp and during the preseason, but it can still crop up here and there. You know, when a goalie comes out of the net to play the puck and it just throws the defense off or doesn't, and you go, wow, what's that goalie thinking? But it can be a matter of a defense not being as familiar with their goaltender as you'd want them to be, and vice versa as well. So I think Chicago's going to be better. The question becomes how much better. This has definitely been an issue with the West, where we've had Anaheim, San Jose, and Chicago just absolutely awful this past season. All three of them should be better this year. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below regarding the Blackhawks. And again, these aren't official season previews because it's way too early to get into that kind of discussion. I've already seen this team's going to be way better for next year. Now I'm saying this team's improved and should be better for next year, but I'm not getting into any kind of projections for next year. Not at this stage. I'm impressed with what Kyle Davidson's been able to do. I think that the Chicago Blackhawks will be back into playoff contention by 2025-2026. So not this season, probably the following season. They have definitely shown an ability to attract veterans, to attract a lot of players. And I think the fact that you have Connor Bedard there means they're going to have players that want to come in and play with Connor Bedard. Same as with the Oilers, you have with Connor McDavid back in the day with Mario Lemieux in Pittsburgh, and you have, of course, with Crosby in Pittsburgh and with Ovechkin in Washington. When you have a prime talent, whether it's a goal scorer, a points producer, or just one of the best all-around players, you're going to have players that want to come in and play with them. So for Chicago, it definitely, I think, is this past season we saw was probably about the worst it's going to get. And things should start getting a lot better this upcoming season. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What do you expect from Chicago? Where do you expect? Do you expect them to still be one of the worst scoring teams, or do you think it's going to get a lot better? Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And ballpark, when you think this team's going to make the playoffs. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.